Read Talk is supported by Read Design. With the power of machine learning, Read Design derives patterns and trends that accurately predict the characteristics of finished reads. Founded by Logan Asterling, Read Design makes quality reads with characteristics you can count on. Save valuable time and get back to what you love, making music. Visit readdesign.io to learn more. Welcome to Read Talk. I'm Margaret Marco.
And I'm Courtney Miller. We're very excited to welcome Sherry Sylar, Associate Principal Oboist of the New York Philharmonic. She teaches oboe at both the Manhattan School of Music and the new school, Mannes College of Music. Let's talk reeds.
Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, ladies.
I'd like to start by asking you about your setup. You play on a Laubin oboe, correct?
That's right. I found that in the hall in which we play, it was the easiest instrument to produce the sound that I wanted to make.
And has playing on a Laubin influenced your reed-making style in any way?
Absolutely. With other oboes, you have to build the sound into the reed, oftentimes. I prefer a darker sound because of our hall, and a Laubin has a cushion to it that you have a little bit more leeway with how easy the reed can play or how bright the reed is. With the Laubin, it makes it darker.
And I should mention the double reed community is mourning the loss of Paul Laubin, who recently passed away. Those are amazing oboes, and it's quite a loss.
It really is. I'm a Laubin hoarder. I own six oboes, 3 different types of wood, and an English horn. Actually, I think I have 4 different kinds of wood. Cocobolo, rosewood, grenadilla, and an oboe made out of teak. And this is the only oboe that Paul made out of this wood, to my knowledge. He called me up when I was having hand problems and said, this oboe is about half the weight of a regular oboe. You might want to come try it. I said, heck yes. So I had this light oboe.
How wonderful. Did you feel you had the same resonance and projection in the hall with the teak?
Yes, I did, although I'm saving it. It felt more like a chamber music oboe than orchestral oboe, and I'm sort of saving it for the time when I don't have to push out so much sound.
Can you tell us about your reed-making mentors and influences?
I'd love to talk about my mentors. When I first got the job, a surprise to many, because I was from the South, I was a second oboe player, nobody had ever heard of me. I got the job, and a good friend of mine was studying with Ronnie Roseman at the time. I was struggling with reeds. It's a real process to step into a sound of an orchestra that size and with that many, shall we say, hunky brutes playing behind you. She was studying with Ronnie, and he had a very particular way of dividing his reeds up, and it sort of helped me get going and sort of develop my own sound.
Ronald Roseman spent a week at the University of Iowa when I was doing my master's there, and I remember him talking about putting a little diamond between the back and the heart. Is my memory correct?
Yes, actually, he left a little diamond of bark. I don't do that, but it was a very eccentric thing. It looked weird, but he swore by it, and I thought he had a beautiful sound.
Yes, absolutely.
When you talked about him dividing it up into stages or levels, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, the reed was actually very geometric, shall we say. If you look at it, there were the windows, the back of the heart, the tip were all very angular. And you make a scrape here, you do the same thing on the other side. Everything was symmetrical, and there weren't a lot of questions about, well, what should I do now?
And so that helped with consistency of reed making as you were developing your own style, I imagine, if you had this approach that was very methodical.
Indeed. I've sort of been thinking a lot about this throughout my career, one of my students was sort of a math nerd, and he looked at my reeds at one point and said, you're really close to the golden ratio. And it's actually a thing in science and in nature. Mm-hmm. So I've been trying to develop what I call the golden ratio reed. So I would say that the person who has had the most influence in me is Dan Ross. I met Dan because I wanted to learn how to sharpen gouger blades. I had an old RDG gouger, and I took it to Dan. He actually put up with me for a weekend, and that was about 25 years ago. And I sat there just transfixed as I watched him put these gougers together, and he'd hand me a piece of cane and say, "Here, make a reed." He wanted me to sit there and make a reed in 10 minutes and then tell him if I liked the gouger or not. And eventually I got adept at doing that, but my goodness, in the beginning I was so nervous around him. Here's this guy in Arkansas, he called himself a country goober. But he knew how to make gougers. So
yes.
The sound that I can get with a Dan Ross gouger is what I'm looking for. I do have an Inno lady, and it seems to work well when the weather is changing. So it gets me in between the cracks. If you know what I mean. Yeah. But Dan was my mentor in many, many more ways than gougers.
He was such a kind man, and he just incredibly hospitable. People would go there to buy their gouging machines, and he would spend a whole weekend with them, helping them get used to it and setting it up for them.
And eating barbecue.
Yes.
Right.
Arkansas barbecue.
Right.
It's different for us here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
You've had this incredible 36-year career with one of the world's top orchestras, the New York Philharmonic. How has your reed making evolved over this period?
Oh my goodness, that's a book. But I came from the Louisville Orchestra, which of course played at 440. And the second I stepped on stage at the New York Philharmonic, I was required to play at 442.
Oh, major change.
Nobody could have told me just how painful that was going to be.
Right.
And Paul Laubin believed in 440. It's a dark oboe. He wants you to play on the dark side. So the higher that hertz goes, the brighter the sound of the oboe. So
exactly.
As much as I begged him to make me a sharp oboe, he wasn't going to do it. Yeah, Paul, I would definitely say was my mentor, even though he was stubborn about pitch. I would go there just to have the hand of the master on my oboe. It seemed like if he touched it, it was golden.
Were you already playing on Laubins when you were in Louisville?
No, I started playing a Laubin about 4 years into my tenure at the Philharmonic.
Interesting.
What tools or techniques did you employ to getting the pitch up from 440 to 442?
Well, it was a process. First of all, I worked on trying to make my staples shorter with a limited amount of success. Now there is so much variety in possibilities in what you can buy. But I struggled, and I eventually came to realize for me that to make the aperture smaller was the key to keeping the pitch up, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a quandary. You say, I like to play on longer reeds because when I make a reed shorter, my pitch goes flat. Now, what's that all about? A longer reed is supposed to be lower, but it isn't really because the aperture is smaller when the reed is longer. So it's my favorite thing to practice etudes on a new reed. there's this quality of the low notes. When you're playing on a 72 millimeter reed, you just pop those low notes out, no worries.
Right. But not so practical when you have to play in the high register or
right.
in tune. Right.
So I do play a 46 millimeter staple. Mm-hmm. And I also do something that very few American oboists do, and that is I use a wire. Now, this came about one year I was playing principal in 2008 when Joe Robinson retired. The number of reeds that you have to make is just ridiculous when you're playing principal. It's just painful. So I've discovered that with a wire, my reeds lasted longer because I had control over the aperture. Even with the weather, it superseded the quandaries of that the weather gives us. So I stuck with it, and I'm still a black sheep in the oboe community, in the American oboe community, but it works for me, so hey.
Right, and they use wire in Europe on European-style reeds.
Right.
What gauge wire do you use for the oboe reeds? Is it the same as you use for your English horn reeds?
I think it's about a 28 gauge for oboe reeds, and a little bit bigger than that for English horn. Anything of smaller diameter sort of breaks. It's hard to put the
twist.
The twist in. Right.
The twist.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about your setup. You mentioned staples that use 46 millimeter staples. What brand of staple do you use?
I use Cherugi. Right now it's just the 46, but every once in a while I'll try the 2s. I use a Ruth -2 Adam Shaper tip, and I have 5 Ross gougers in the Inolidi. Yeah, so I've got them set up for different purposes, and I have my own blade grinder, which Dan made me promise not to tell OSHA.
For sharpening your own gouging machine blades?
Yes, and I sort of have a little business with my partner doing that. So
that's fabulous.
But Phil Ross is also carrying on the Ross tradition.
That's right. Thank goodness.
Yes, indeed.
Can you talk a little bit about your scrape? Where do you go to build in beautiful pitch and tone and still maintain stability in that reed?
I mentioned the golden ratio reed. I've been working with a botanist and an engineer, and we've come up with some algorithms that you can put in your longitude and latitude, your weather in the city where you live, and get a perfect reed.
Oh, please elaborate on that. This is
we need more about this. What?
I'm getting goosebumps. Tell me more.
Well, April Fool.
That was a good one. Yes, this won't air on April 1st, but it is being recorded on April 1st, so you got me good.
You really got us going there.
Dan was a firm believer that to keep it simple, and basically with a Ross gouge, if everything is correctly adjusted, you can scrape the bark off the tip, make the tip, and just take a little bit out of the back, and the reed will play.
Oh.
That was his philosophy. Mm-hmm. Just the most important thing is make the tip. So I would say the majority of my time is spent refining the tip, clipping the tip, refining the tip. And I say that over and over to my students. Go to the corner of the tip, make a beautiful rays of sunshine where the thinnest part of the reed is the very end. No clicks when you feel that knife going across the tip. Can't have any clicks when you go to the plaque. That's death for low notes.
Right.
But I also have the Roseman, the very clear division between the heart and the windows, shall we call them. For me, I actually measure from the top thread. The back of my heart starts at 13 millimeters above the top thread. Uh-huh. And then 19 millimeters is where the tip starts. And I sort of stick to that.
Oh, that's very, very enlightening.
Stay away from the spine and keep